been able to imagine as a boy back in Pennsylvania, where he roamed the woods and dreamed of the frontier. Chapter 2. A Love of the Outdoors. 5-year-old Daniel Boone stared at the barred cabin door. "It ain't fair," he said to his mother. "Let's not get into that again, Daniel," she chided. "You'll just have to accept it. There's a lot of smallpox about, and you can't go outside and play with the neighbor children. You might catch the illness from one of them." Daniel wanted to ask what was so awful about that, but he held his tongue. Everyone knew that smallpox could make people very sick, or even kill them. But staying inside the cabin, cooped up with his 6 brothers and sisters, seemed just about as bad to Daniel as having smallpox. Daniel's 7-year-old sister Elizabeth signaled to him.
"I have an idea," she whispered. "Come up to the loft."
Dutifully, Daniel followed her up the ladder and plunked himself down on his chaff-filled mattress.
"You know why we ain't allowed to go outside and play with the other children, don't you?" Elizabeth asked. "'Cause we might catch the pox off of one of them," Daniel replied. "Well," Elizabeth went on, "I've been thinking about this mighty hard, and I reckon if we did catch the pox and then got better, we would be able to play with all the other children who have had it. Don't you think?"
Daniel tried hard to follow her reasoning.
"But the pox is bad," he said. "Not as bad as staying here in the cabin day after day," Elizabeth replied.
Daniel nodded. He and Elizabeth felt the same about being outside. They liked the same activities, such as playing in the woods and making up Indian stories, and having pea-shooting competitions. So their mother's new rules were difficult for both of them, unlike for their oldest sister Sarah, who spent all day helping her mother around the cabin and seemed to enjoy it.
"How could we catch the pox and get it over with?"
Daniel asked.
"We go play with the Clausen children, silly. All of them have it." "But how will we get out of the cabin without Ma catching us?"
Daniel wondered, glancing down at the barred door.
"Do I have to think of everything?" Elizabeth asked with a sigh. "After dark, when everyone's asleep, we open the door and creep out. When we get to the Clausen cabin, we climb the outside ladder to the upstairs loft and knock on the trap door. The children are bound to let us in. They're probably just as bored as we are. And then we can catch the pox off them. What do you think?"
What did he think? Escaping from the house in the middle of the night, sneaking into the Clausens' cabin, and catching the pox so he could play with his friends again? It sounded like an adventure. It sounded great. The rest of the day dragged on. Daniel's mother, Sarah, let him outside for a few minutes to collect kindling for the fire, but he was on strict instructions not to go more than a few paces from the cabin. A squirrel and then a jackrabbit crossed Daniel's path, and Daniel ached to have his slingshot in his hands. How wonderful it would be to roam the woods again. That night, when everyone was asleep, Elizabeth and Daniel crept down the ladder. Slowly, Daniel lifted the bar on the door and pushed it open. It was a moonlit night, and soon they were off, hand in hand, around their father's blacksmith shop and along the rough track that led into the Pennsylvania forest. When they reached the Clausens' cabin, everything went as planned. Samuel, the oldest Clausen boy, let Daniel and Elizabeth in, and soon they were all sitting side by side telling scary stories. Daniel made sure his knees touched Samuel's and that he took deep breaths of the smallpox-infected air. After about half an hour, everyone got sleepy, and the 2 Boone children climbed back down the ladder and headed for home. 5 days later, Daniel was not so sure he had done the right thing. His throat burned, and welts were popping up all over his body. His mother took one look at him and said, "Now, Daniel, I want you to tell me the truth. How did you get the pox when you were forbidden to play with the other children?" Daniel looked around for Elizabeth, but she was still in the loft. He would have to face this alone.
I